The doctor said, "Time of death, 3:47 p.m." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. A billionaire father, a man who built empires, collapsed to his knees, broken, destroyed, with nothing left to live for. He'd already buried his wife 6 months ago. Now his baby son, his last piece of her, was gone. Nurses reached toward the machines to turn them off. It was protocol. It was over. And then a voice nobody expected, a voice that had no business being there, cut to the crying. "He's not gone." It was the voice of a homeless boy, a kid who'd been sleeping behind dumpsters, a boy who had absolutely nothing, but refused to let death win. What happened in the next 60 seconds would make doctors question everything they knew, would make a father believe in miracles again, and would prove that sometimes the people the world throws away are exactly the ones who save it. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, I want you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share to your loved ones. This will help us bring more interesting stories. Let me tell you about a boy named Tyler, just 14 years old, thin as a whisper, with lips cracked from the cold and hands rough from sleeping on concrete. Tyler hadn't eaten in 2 days. Not because he was lazy, not because he didn't try, but because when you're homeless and alone, every day is a battle just to survive. Tyler lived behind the dumpsters of St. Catherine's Hospital in downtown Portland, Oregon. Not a glamorous address, I know, but those metal walls blocked the wind on freezing nights. Sometimes, if he was lucky, a kind nurse would bring him leftover bread from the cafeteria. Other times, security would chase him away, telling him he was bad for business, scaring the patients. But Tyler never begged. He had his pride, even when he had nothing else. He would just stand near the hospital entrance, watching people come and go, watching them rush through those automatic doors, warm and clean, carrying things he'd never owned. A hot cup of coffee, a phone that actually worked, a jacket without holes. On this particular day, rain fell from the sky like it had a grudge against the world. Cold, heavy, relentless. Tyler stood there soaking wet, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. He wasn't trying to get inside. He wasn't causing trouble. He was just there, watching life happen to other people. Inside one of those bright hospital rooms, something terrible was happening. A baby boy lay on a bed surrounded by machines. His name was Oliver Bennett, 8 months old. Tubes ran everywhere, machines breathing for him because his tiny body couldn't do it anymore. His chest barely moved. The doctor stood in silence, the kind of silence that says everything without words. Dr. Patterson, the lead physician, stared at the monitor for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, he removed his gloves. His hands were shaking. "I'm so sorry," he said softly, his voice cracking. "Time of death, 3:47 p.m. The sound of crying filled the room. Not just any crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep inside, where hope used to live. Oliver's father, Richard Bennett, collapsed to his knees. This man, a real estate mogul known across the entire West Coast, a man who built shopping malls and luxury condos, a man whose name appeared on buildings, fell apart on that hospital floor. His expensive suit, probably worth more than most people make in a month, meant absolutely nothing now. He pressed his face against the cold tile and couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't accept that this was real. You see, Richard had already buried his wife, Catherine, just 6 months earlier. She died 2 weeks after giving birth to Oliver. Complications, the doctors said, as if that word makes losing someone hurt any less. And now, the last piece of her, the only thing he had left, was slipping away. A nurse named Jennifer reached toward the machines to turn them off. It was protocol, standard procedure. When there's no heartbeat, no brain activity, no hope, you turn off the machines. You let them go, but that's when Tyler walked in. Nobody noticed him at first. How could they? He was just a wet, shivering kid who didn't belong there. But Tyler noticed something. Something everyone else, in their grief and exhaustion, had missed. The baby's mouth twitched. It was tiny, barely there, like a whisper in a hurricane. But Tyler saw it. His heart slammed against his ribs. "He's not gone," Tyler said, his voice cutting through the crying. The room went still. Everyone turned to look at this dripping wet kid who had no business being there. "Get him out of here," someone snapped. Maybe it was a doctor. Maybe it was security. In that moment, it didn't matter. They saw him as a problem to be removed. Jennifer reached for the machine again. "No!" Tyler shouted, louder this time. And before anyone could stop him, before anyone could grab him or throw him out, Tyler did something crazy. He ran forward, grabbed that baby, and pulled out the tubes. Alarm screamed. Red lights flashed. Doctors yelled. Security rushed forward. It was chaos, but Tyler didn't stop. He didn't think. He just moved on pure instinct, like something bigger than him was guiding his hands. He ran straight to the sink in the corner of the room. He held Oliver the way he'd once seen his mother hold his baby sister before she got sick, before everything fell apart, before Tyler ended up alone. He tilted the baby forward just slightly and let water run over his tiny mouth. Not fast, not rough, just enough. "In the name of Jesus," Tyler whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, breathe." Seconds felt like hours. The kind of seconds where your whole world holds its breath, where time stretches and bends and you're not sure if you're standing or falling. Then a cough. Small, wet, weak. Water spilled from Oliver's mouth. Another cough, stronger this time. And then a cry, thin, fragile, but unmistakably alive. Everyone in that room froze. The baby they had just pronounced dead was crying. The baby with no heartbeat was breathing. The baby they were ready to give up on was fighting for life. The hospital erupted. Doctors rushed forward, shouting orders. Nurses grabbed equipment. Someone called for backup. Everyone moved at once, a blur of white coats and urgent voices. Security guards grabbed Tyler's arms, pulling him back. But the baby was still crying. That sound that no one thought they'd ever hear again filled the room. "Wait," Dr. Patterson said slowly, his face pale. "Wait." They checked the monitors. Oxygen levels climbing. Heartbeat registering. Weak. Yes. Unstable. Sure. But real. Undeniably real. "This is impossible," someone whispered. They took Oliver back to the bed. Carefully. Gently. Machines were restarted. Tubes were replaced, this time with trembling hands. But this time, Oliver fought them. His tiny fingers moved. His eyes fluttered. Tyler stood in the corner, shaking, arms wrapped around himself. His wet clothes dripped water onto the clean hospital floor. He looked smaller than ever, like he might disappear if he looked away. No one knew what to do with him. Security still had their hands on his shoulders, ready to escort him out. Dr. Patterson looked between the boy and the baby, his mind trying to process something that made no medical sense. But Richard Bennett walked toward Tyler, slowly, like a man in a dream. Up close, Tyler looked even younger than 14, dirt under his fingernails, old scars on his skinny arms. Fear in his eyes that said he'd been hurt before and expected it to happen again. "You saved my son," Richard said, and his voice cracked on every word. Tyler looked down at his feet. "I just didn't want him to die," he whispered. Doctors pulled Richard aside. They spoke in those low, serious voices doctors use when they don't have answers. "What that boy did shouldn't have worked," Dr. Patterson said. "There's no medical explanation. The child was clinically dead." But somehow he responded. They ran more tests. Scans. Blood work. Everything they could think of. Oliver's brain activity had changed. Not healed completely, but waking up like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. The doctors had no words, no explanations. No textbook had prepared them for this. Tyler sat alone in a plastic chair in the hallway, his stomach growling so loud it hurt. Jennifer, the nurse who'd almost turned off the machines, brought him a sandwich and a cup of hot chocolate. He ate slowly, carefully, like the food might vanish if he rushed. Like maybe this was all a dream and he'd wake up behind the dumpster again. Later that night, after all the tests were done and Oliver was stable, Richard came back. "Where's your family?" he asked gently. Tyler looked at his hands. "My mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. My little sister got sick after that. Same thing. I was in foster care for a while, but he trailed off. I ran away. It was bad there. Richard swallowed hard. This boy had lost everything, had nothing, was nobody's priority, and still, somehow, he'd seen what everyone else missed. You can't go back outside tonight, Richard said firmly. Please, stay. That night, for the first time in years, Tyler slept in a clean bed, in a warm room, where no one chased him away. The news spread like wildfire. By morning, reporters crowded outside St. Catherine's Hospital. Camera crews, journalists shouting questions. Everyone wanted the story of the boy who brought a baby back from the dead. Inside, doctors huddled in conference rooms, trying to make sense of what happened. They reviewed footage from security cameras. They analyzed the timeline. They argued about medical possibilities. He may never walk, Dr. Patterson told Richard, his voice careful. He may never talk, but your son is alive. Against every odd, every medical prediction, he's breathing on his own. And Tyler stayed. Every single day, he sat by Oliver's bed. He talked to him in a soft voice, told him about the stars and how they looked when you had nowhere to sleep, but the skies stretched forever above you. He sang songs his mother used to sing, old hymns about grace and mercy. Oliver responded. A finger curled around Tyler's. An eye opened, a soft sound, almost like recognition. The nurses watched in silence. Jennifer whispered to another nurse one afternoon, "He responds more to that boy than to any of us." Richard watched too. He'd built an empire with his bare hands, climbed from nothing to everything, made millions through sheer determination. But this homeless boy had done something his money couldn't buy, had seen something his education couldn't explain. One night, Oliver's oxygen levels dropped suddenly. Alarms blared. Doctors rushed in, adjusting tubes, checking monitors, calling out numbers that meant nothing to Tyler, but everything to them. Tyler stood frozen in the corner, terrified, feeling helpless, feeling like maybe he'd failed, like maybe the miracle was only temporary. Then Oliver's tiny hand reached out. It closed around Tyler's finger, and slowly, so slowly, the numbers on the monitor began to climb. Dr. Patterson stared at the screen. "He stabilizes when a boy is near," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No one argued. The media called it a miracle. Churches invited Tyler to speak. Some called him blessed, chosen, sent by God. Others called it luck, coincidence, timing. Scientists demanded investigations. Skeptics wrote articles questioning everything. Online, the debates raged. Science versus faith. Proof versus belief. Everyone had an opinion about what happened in room 304. But Richard kept Tyler away from all of it. "You don't owe the world your story," he told him one evening. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." Months passed. Oliver learned to swallow on his own, then to sit up. Then one morning, he laughed. A real, genuine baby laugh that made the nurses cry happy tears. Doctors called an unexplained recovery. They wrote papers about it, presented at conferences, tried to find patterns in the data. Richard called it grace. Tyler no longer slept behind dumpsters. He had a room now, clean clothes, food every day. He went to school, struggled with reading at first, struggled even more with trusting adults who said they cared. He flinched at raised voices, slept with the lights on, hid food under his bed for months, even though the kitchen was always full. Old habits from survival don't just disappear because your circumstances change. Richard never scolded him. He understood. He'd grown up poor himself, had clawed his way up from nothing. He remembered what hunger felt like, what fear tasted like. One afternoon, Richard sat beside Tyler on the porch of their home in the hills overlooking Portland. "You know," Richard said quietly, "you didn't just save my son's life that day." Tyler looked at him, confused. "You saved mine too," Richard continued. "After Catherine died, after I lost her, I was just going through the motions, building buildings, making deals, but not really living. And when Oliver," his voice caught, "when I thought I'd lost him too, I had nothing left. No reason to keep going. He put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. You gave me my son back. But more than that, you reminded me what matters. Not the money, not the empire. Just being there, showing up, caring. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. That year, Richard filed the adoption papers. Not because Tyler had performed a miracle, not because he owed him, but because Tyler had already lived through enough pain to understand how fragile life was, how precious, how worth protecting. Years moved forward the way they do, quietly, until one day you turn around and realize everything has changed. Tyler grew into the Bennett house the way sunlight fills a room. Not all at once, but slowly, until the darkness is just a memory. He got better at school, made a few friends, started to believe, just a little, that maybe this was real. Maybe he wasn't going back to the streets. Oliver grew strong. Small victories that felt like mountains. One step, then another. One word, then a sentence. A laugh that echoed through the house and made everyone stop what they were doing just to hear it again. But pain has a way of resurfacing, even when you think you've buried it deep enough. When Tyler turned 17, he froze one afternoon at a crosswalk downtown. Rain fell suddenly, heavy and cold, just like that day at the hospital. The smell of wet concrete hit him like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, he wasn't 17 anymore. He was 14 again, shaking behind dumpsters, wondering if he'd make it through another night. His breath caught in his throat, his vision blurred. The world tilted. Oliver, now 6 years old and walking with just a slight limp, noticed first. Kids see things adults miss sometimes. Tyler? Oliver said softly, reaching for his hand. Tyler dropped to his knees right there on the sidewalk. People walked past, annoyed, stepping around him like he was just another obstacle. But Oliver knelt with him. Oliver pressed his forehead against Tyler's. Oliver whispered the same words that had once been whispered to him. Breathe, Oliver said. Please breathe. And Tyler did, slowly, one breath at a time, until the world came back into focus. That night, Tyler finally told Richard everything. The things he'd never said. The guilt that ate at him every day. Survivor's guilt, they called it. The feeling that he should have died instead of his mom, instead of his sister. The fear that one day Richard would realize he'd made a mistake. That Tyler wasn't worth saving. The weight of being called a miracle when he still felt broken inside. Richard listened. Really listened. Not with solutions or fixes, just with presence. Then he said something Tyler would carry with him forever. Tyler, Richard said slowly, you didn't save Oliver because you were special. You saved him because you knew what it meant to be invisible. You acted when everyone else had already decided the story was over. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The world sees miracles as these big, flashy things. Angels appearing, sees parting, thunder and lightning. But maybe real miracles are quieter than that. Maybe they're just people who've been hurt deciding to protect others from that same hurt. You don't have to be perfect to matter, son. You just have to show up. Tyler cried then. Really cried. The kind of crying he'd been holding back for years. Richard held him while he did. No judgment. No pressure. Just steady, solid presence. High school was hard. College was harder. Tyler struggled with test anxiety, with imposter syndrome, with feeling like he didn't belong in classrooms with kids who'd never miss a meal or slept outside. But he kept going, one day at a time, one class at a time. He studied nursing, not because it was glamorous, not because it paid well, but because he remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have people look right through you like you weren't even there. He wanted to be the person who saw people, really saw them. Oliver grew up strong. He walked with a limp. Sure, he had to work twice as hard in physical therapy to do things other kids did easily. But he walked, he ran, he played, and he never forgot who gave him that chance. One night, when Oliver was 12 and Tyler was home from nursing school on break, they sat on the porch watching the city lights below. Tyler? Oliver asked quietly. Yeah. Do you think I'd still be here if you hadn't walked into that room? Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, soft and genuine. "I think," he said carefully, "that love walked into that room. Whether it was me or someone else, whether it was luck or God, or just the universe saying, 'Not yet,' something bigger than all of us decided you had more life to live." He looked at his little brother. "And I'm really, really glad it did." Oliver leaned against him. "Me too." Tyler became a pediatric nurse. Not famous, not celebrated. No news crews following him around. Just another nurse in scrubs, working night shifts, drinking too much coffee, going home exhausted. But here's the thing about Tyler. He saw the parents everyone else overlooked, the ones who sat in waiting rooms at 3 a.m. with faces gray from fear, the ones who couldn't afford the parking fees but stayed anyway, the ones who tried to act strong but were falling apart inside. He sat with them, brought them coffee, listened to their stories, not because it was his job, but because he remembered what it felt like to be invisible. He talked to the kids who couldn't sleep, the ones who were scared of the dark, scared of the needles, scared of being alone. He told them about the stars, sang soft songs, held their hands during the scary parts. Sometimes, when doctors turned away too quickly, when treatment plans were discussed like the child wasn't even there, Tyler stayed. He made eye contact. He said their name. He reminded everyone in the room that this was a person, not just a case number. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a child who everyone said would make it did. Not because of any miracle, but because someone believed they were worth fighting for. Someone saw them. Someone stayed. Oliver went to college, studied business like his dad, but he volunteered at the hospital every weekend, not for resume points or college applications, but because Tyler had taught him something important. Showing up matters. Richard watched both his sons with pride that sometimes made his chest hurt. He'd lost Catherine, would always carry that grief, but she'd left him something precious, a son who fought to live. And through that son, a second son who fought for others. He changed too, started funding shelters. Not big, flashy donations with his name on buildings, but quiet support, food programs, youth services, places where kids like Tyler could get help before they ended up sleeping behind dumpsters. One evening, 15 years after that day in the hospital, a reporter tracked Tyler down, wanted to do a Where Are They Now story. The miracle boy and the baby he saved. Tyler politely declined. But people want to know, the reporter pushed. They want hope. They want to believe in miracles. Tyler thought about that. Then he smiled, tired but genuine. "Tell them this," he said. "Miracles aren't always loud. They're not always obvious. Sometimes they're just people who've been hurt, deciding to show up anyway, deciding to care anyway, deciding that someone else's life matters, even when the whole world says it's over." He paused. "Tell them that the kid sleeping in their alley, the patient everyone's given up on, the person everyone walks past without seeing, they all matter. And sometimes all it takes is one person to refuse to look away." The reporter wrote it down, but never published the story. Said it wasn't dramatic enough. Not enough spectacle. Tyler didn't mind. He went back to work. Years later, on Oliver's wedding day, Richard stood to give a toast. The reception was beautiful. Flowers everywhere. String lights. Happy faces. He looked at Oliver, handsome in his suit, standing next to his new wife. Looked at Tyler, sitting at the family table, older now, but still with that gentle way about him. "Most of you know the story," Richard began, "about how Oliver shouldn't be here, about how Tyler saved him when everyone else, including me, had given up." He paused, emotion thick in his throat. "But what you might not know is that a boy the world had given up and refused to give up on my son. A kid who had every reason to be bitter, angry, closed off, chose to care instead, chose to act, chose love." He raised his glass. "To Tyler, who taught us all what it means to truly see people. And to Oliver, who reminds us every day why it matters." Everyone stood. Glasses clinked. Tears were shed. Later, when the party wound down and people started heading home, Tyler stepped outside for air. The night was clear. Stars everywhere, like diamonds spilled across black velvet. Oliver found him there. "Hey, Oliver said softly. Hey yourself. Shouldn't you be with your wife? Oliver shrugged, smiling. She'll understand. I needed to say something. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Thank you, Oliver said finally, for everything, for that day, for every day after, for being my brother. Tyler's eyes got misty. You know what's funny? He said. Everyone thinks I saved you. But really you saved me too. You and your dad, you gave me a reason to believe life could be good again, that I could be worth something. Oliver pulled him into a hug. We saved each other then. And maybe that's what miracles really are. Not lightning from heaven or seas parting. Just broken people helping each other heal. Just humans choosing love when hate would be easier. Just someone deciding that another person's life matters and acting on it. The stars shone above them, same as always. The city hummed below. Somewhere, quietly, without headlines or cameras, the world healed just a little bit more. Because Tyler had walked into that room 15 years ago. Because he'd refused to look away. Because he cared when caring cost him everything and promised him nothing. And that, more than anything, is what changed the world.